Cardiac assessment. Cardiovascular assessment, it's divided into part 1 and part 2. And in part 1, the assessment of cardiovascular function, health history. And in coming to physical assessment, we'll be doing inspection, palpation, percussion, and auscultation. And coming to the laboratory test, cardiac enzyme, lipid profile, coagulation studies. And in part 2, assessment of cardiovascular structure, diagnostic studies, ECG, echocardiography, X-ray, the exercise stress, and the cardiac catheterization. Let us see the valves of the heart. So the tricuspid valve, it directs the flow of blood from the right atrium to the left ventricle, and the mitral valve directs the flow of blood from the left atrium to the left ventricle, and the pulmonic valve or semilunar valve lies between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery, and the aortic valve that lies between the left ventricle and the aortic artery. Part 1, we will move on to assessment of cardiovascular function, that is physical assessment. So first we will start with the health history. In that socio-cultural history, mainly we will ask the patient age, sex, occupation, educational level, marital status, and in patient history, past medical history and post surgical history, and any family history of heart disease and psychosocial profile. And in symptom analysis, chest pain. So mainly the cardiac patient will be having a chest pain. So in case if there is a chest pain, we will ask the location, whether it's in substernal area or pericardial diffuse or localized, and whether the chest pain is radiating to jaw or neck, and the character of chest pain, whether it's dull, aching, pressure, burning tightness or crushing, and the intensity, whether it's mild, moderate, severe, or it's sudden or gradual, and how long it's lasting, either it's lasting for 1 to 10 minutes or more than 15 minutes, or the patient is feeling the chest pain continuously. And the precipitative factors, that exercise, the motion, eating, so these are the precipitative factors, so that they are having the aggravating of pain. And when it's getting relieved, when taking rest or walking or warmth or drugs. And in accompanying symptoms, so whether the patient has a chest pain with dyspnea, restlessness, sweating, vomiting, cough, syncope, and fatigue. And the pain assessment technique. So the pain, usually the patient will be self-reporting, and we will be measuring the level of pain by using certain pain scale, that is numeric pain scale. That score starts from 0 to 10 to assess the degree of pain. And in simple description, intensity scale uses 3 ways, that is mild, moderate, and severe, to describe the patient's pain intensity. And in visual analog scale requires patient to mark a point on a 10 centimeter horizontal or a vertical line. So there they will be marking the intensity of pain which they are perceiving. And 0 indicating no pain, and 10 indicating the worst possible pain. Here you can see that is 0 indicates the no pain, and 1, 2, 3 it's a mild, 4, 5, 6 moderate, and 7, 8, 9, 7 to 10 it's severe pain. So if the pain is in substernal or retrosternal pain or spreading across chest, may radiate to inside of arm, neck, and if this pain lasts for 5 to 15 minutes, usually related to excursion or emotion, eating or cold, and here this type of pain will be subsided after taking rest, or even if you are giving sublingual nitroglycerin, or even starting oxygen. And in the pain, it's related to myocardial infarction. The pain will be substernal pain or pain over pericardium, may spread widely throughout chest, and even it may be radiate to shoulders and hands. And this will last above 15 minutes, and most of the pain will be occurring spontaneously, but may be sequel to unstable angina. And here we will be administering morphine sulfate. It's an narcotic analgesic, and successful reperfusion of blocked coronary artery. Then coming to the esophageal pain. So here the patient will be feeling a pain in the substernal area, may be projected around chest to shoulders, and it will last for 5 to 60 minutes. And here, whenever the patient is in recumbency position or cold liquids or doing exercise, or even sometimes it may even occur spontaneously. And it may be subside by taking antacid or even mild food or nitroglycerin. So this ways it will be relieving the pain and spasm. And anxiety, pain over chest may be variable and it may not radiate, and patient may be complain of numbness and tingling of hands and mouth, and it will last for 2 to 3 minutes associated with the stress emotional tachypnea. And once if you are remove the stimulus and the patient, we are asking the patient to relax, the thing will be subsided. Then palpitations, then syncope. Syncope, commonly we call it as dizziness. It is one of the major signal for cardiovascular problem. And edema. And edema, mainly we will be seeing edema in the right heart failure. The right heart failure, then the two symptoms which denotes the right heart failure, that is jugular vein distension and pedal edema. And pitting edema is a depression in the skin from pressure. And to demonstrate the presence of pitting edema, the nerve pressures firmly with the thumb over a body surface. And the severity of the edema also will be described on 5-point scale, start from 0 to 4. And 1 plus indicates mild pitting, slight indentation, no perceptible swelling of the leg. And 2 plus indicates a moderate pitting, indentation subsides rapidly. And in case of 3 plus score, it is deep pitting, indentation remains for a short time and leg looks swollen. And for 4 plus, very deep pitting, indentation lasts a long time, leg is very swollen. And fatigue associated with cardiovascular disease, and some extreme changes will also provide some clues like numbness and tingling and coolness and intermittent claudication, and some people even they will be having pain in the calf muscle during ambulation. These all the things associated, and it indicates that the particular person has vascular disease, coronary heart disease or cerebral vascular disease. And dyspnea and cough mainly occur that the people, those are having a left heart failure. And physical assessment, we will do assess general appearance of patient, vital signs, height and weight. So inspection and palpation. So inspection mainly we will look for the skin color, turgor, temperature and moisture. The nails should be assessed for color, shape and the thickness, symmetry and adherence. So normal nail color is some variation of pink, and we also assess the capillary fill, and nail thickness generally 0.3 to 0.65, but it may be thicker in men. And nail abnormalities, the people those are having a peripheral vascular disease can produce a nail depression, and even some people may be having the clubbing of fingers. Here you can see the clubbing, nail clubbing. The clubbing of fingers is associated with the decreased oxygen, and in clubbing the distal tip of the fingers become bulbous, the nail are thickened, hard and curved at the tip, and the nail bed feels buggy when squeezed, and separation from the nail bed produces a white, yellowish or greenish color on the non-adherent portion of the nail. And the capillary refill time, normally it is less than 2 seconds. So it's quickly test to assess the adequacy of circulation. So why we are doing the capillary refill? In order to assess the circulation, blood circulation of the patient. Here an area of skin is pressed firmly a fingertip until it becomes white. So the number of seconds for the area turn pink again indicates a capillary refill time. So inspection and palpation, inspection of neck. So inspection of neck, mainly we will be notice whether there is a sign of jugular vein distension. Inspecting, we will also assess the carotid artery and jugular vein, and with the patient in a supine position, inspect the carotid and jugular venous system in the neck for pulsation. And to visualize external venous pulsation, so mainly we will look the pulsation in the supraclavicular area. And in case if you want to visualize internal venous pulsation, so we should assess the suprasternal notch, and using a pen light to cast a shadow on the neck vessels may help to visualize the pulsation. And the carotid have visible pulsation, jugular have undiluted wave. And usually the carotids are not affected by respiration, and jugulars will be affected, and carotids not affected by position, and jugulars normally only visible when client in supine position. So in case if you want to assess the jugular vein, better make the patient to lie in a supine position. And large bounding visible pulsation in neck of suprasternal notion, that is for hypertension and aortic stenosis. Measuring jugular venous pressure. So here the position the patient with the head of the bed at 30 to 45 degree angle, that is semi-fallows position, and place the ruler vertically perpendicular to the chest at the angle of Lewis at the sternal angle. And here you can see the angle of Lewis, that is the sternal angle, and that is second intercostal space, third intercostal space, and that is the fourth intercostal space. And identify the highest level of jugular vein pulsation. If sometimes you may not be feeling the pulsation, so use the highest level of jugular vein distension and place another ruler horizontally at the point of the highest level of venous pulsation. We can also measure the distance from the chest wall. So the normal jugular venous pressure is less than 3 centimeter, and the central venous pressure estimated by adding 5 centimeter to the jugular venous pressure. And you can see here it's the jugular venous pressure monitor, that is manually connected to an IV line. So here we will be monitoring manually, and you can see the external jugular vein, clavicle, internal jugular vein. And elevated jugular venous pressure indicates right side heart failure, constrictive pericarditis, or tricuspid stenosis, or superior vena cava obstruction. And in case if the patient has a low jugular venous pressure, it indicates that is hypovolemia, that is fluid volume deficit. Coming to the palpation, so the palpating the carotid artery. So lightly palpate each carotid separately, both right and left, and note for the rate, rhythm, amplitude, counter, symmetry, elasticity, thrills. And palpate in the jugulars, the palpate jugular veins and check direction of fill, occluding under the jaw. The jugular should flatten, but the waveform become more prominent. And in case if you are occluding above the clavicle, the jugular normally distends. Next, coming to the precordium, palpating the precordium. Here identify and palpate each cardiac site for pulsation and thrill. So first start from apex, that is left ventricular area, or mitral area, that is the site of fifth intercostal space of the mid-clavicular line. Here we will be palpating the apex of the heart. So if you want to palpate the apex of the heart, keep your finger pad on the fifth intercostal space at the mid-clavicular line. And that is base right, that is aortic area, and second intercostal space, right sternal border. And this LLSB, the left lower sternal border, that is the tricuspid area, that is fourth to fifth intercostal spaces, left sternal border. and base left, that is the pulmonic area, that is second intercostal space of left sternal border. And listen at each side with both the bell and diaphragm. So if you want to hear the sound, we should use both the bell and the diaphragm of the stethoscope. So first diagram you see auscultating with the bell of stethoscope, second one auscultating with the diaphragm of stethoscope. Then coming to the palpation, that is finger pads we will be using. So the thrill sound, it indicates it is some vibrations palpated secondary to a murmur, and it will be a turbulent blood flow through a heart wall, that is the bony part of hand, ball of hand. And thrills or palpable vibrations created by turbulent blood flow, and lifts of heaves or diffuse lifting impulses, and a thrust sound is a rocking movement. Coming to the auscultation, so in diaphragm, medium and high frequency sounds, and bell low frequency sounds, and normally heart closer of wall sounds from left side of the heart louder than equivalent sound from right side of heart. So we will be hearing mainly when we are auscultating, we will be getting an S1 and S2 sound. S1 shows that is the closure of mitral and tricuspid valve, and S2 shows that is closure of aortic and pulmonic valve. And the S1 and S2 sound will be louder when we are comparing with S3 and S4 sound. S3 and S4 sound is always a low pitched sound and indicates that the patient has a mitral stenosis. And right second intercostal space, that is the aortic area, and left second intercostal space is a pulmonic area, and left lower sternal border it's a tricuspid area, and apex, that is ovo-apical impulse, that is the mitral area. That is, here you can see the landmark, that is aortic area, pulmonic area, and this E is an Epps point, and T tricuspid area and mitral area. And the aortic and pulmonic areas are correlated anatomically with the base of the heart. And S3, this ventricular gallop may be had in the tricuspid and mitral areas during the early to mid diastole following S2 sound. And S3 heard when the client is in left lateral recumbent position. And S4, that is the abnormal sound, S4 is called as atrial diastolic gallop, may be heard in tricuspid and mitral areas during the late phase of diastole. And S4 heard when the client is in supine position. Then coming to the auscultating the precordium, here we will be auscultate the apex, note for rate, rhythm, extra sound or murmurs, and S1 and S2 sound normal will be here, and we will also look for S3 and S4 sound or any cardiac murmur, and listen at each side with both the bell and diaphragm of the stethoscope. So heart murmur and stenosis. So here a valve that does not close efficiently results in backflow of blood. So this is the thing we are called as insufficiency or regurgitation. Regurgitation is nothing but it's a backflow of blood. The valve doesn't close it. So that is the backflow of blood, and even a valve that does not open wide enough may cause turbulent backflow secondary to obstruction or narrowing. So that's what we call the stenosis. So in abnormal finding, irregular rhythm we call as arrhythmia, and accentuated S1 high output states, mitral or tricuspid stenosis, and in case the S1 sound is diminished, it indicates first degree heart block or complete heart failure or coronary artery disease. And if there is any variable in S1 sound, it may indicate atrial fibrillation. And this abnormal sound S3, if we are hearing the S3 sound as low pitched and it's an early diastolic sound, it indicates that the patient is in complete heart failure. And even the abnormal sound, that is S4, that is low pitched, that is late diastolic sound, indicates coronary artery disease, hypertension and myocardial infarction. Coming to the ejection fraction. So the ejection fraction mainly we will be notifying in case if we are doing an invasive procedure like coronary angiography, or even like when we are doing the echocardiography, we can assess the ejection fraction. So the ejection fraction represents the amount of blood pumped out of the heart, that is in the left ventricle with each heartbeat. So the normal ejection fraction is 65 to 70%, and in case the patient has an ejection fraction below 55% is considered as abnormal, and the patient may have some heart disorder. Here you can see that is the atrial depolarization. Atrial depolarization is a contraction of atria, we are getting a P wave, and ventricular depolarization, that is the contraction of ventricle, we are getting a QRS. And the third one, that is the ventricular repolarization, that is the relaxation of ventricle, we are getting a T wave. And here this is the ECG of an acute anterior septal MI. Here you can see there is an ST elevation in V2, V3, V4, V5, V6. So it indicates that the patient has an anterior septal MI. So how we will place the electrodes, that is the electrode position leads. So the leads measure electrical activity between 2 points. So the movement toward electrode causes positive deflection, and movement away from the electrode causes negative deflection. And coming to the electrode position, the 12 lead ECG that shows electrical activity from 12 different positions of the heart, and 14 lead ECG includes right ventricle activity. Cardiac output, that is stroke volume, cardiac output, preload, afterload, and ejection fraction. And here the goal is to maintain adequate mean aortic pressure, so perfusion of oxygenated blood to vital organ occurs. Stroke volume and cardiac output. So stroke volume is nothing but amount of blood ejected by one ventricle in 1 beat, and cardiac output volume ejected in 1 minute, and the control of heart stroke volume and heart rate. And stroke volume and heart rate are continually adjusted by the body and are affected by the return of blood from the tissues. So cardiac output, that is the formula, so normally we call it as that is stroke volume into heart rate. So here we can see what is preload and what is afterload. So the preload, it's a volume of blood in ventricles at each end of diastole. That's what we call as end diastolic pressure. So normally preload pressure will be increasing in the situation of hypervolemia or regurgitation of cardiac walls. And afterload is nothing but resistance of left ventricle must overcome to circulate blood, and this afterload will be increased in hypertension and vasoconstriction. The afterload also will be increased, and cardiac workload also will be increased. So decreased S-sound sound. So decreased S-sound sound indicates that is the slowed ventricular ejection rate and mitral insufficiency, and increased chest wall thickness, pericardial effusion, and hypothyroidism. And even cardiomyopathy, left bundle branch block, shock, aortic insufficiency, first degree atrioventricular block. And other abnormal S-sound sound, that is increased S-sound sound, it denotes that increased cardiac output, increased atrioventricular wall flow velocity, that is acquired mitral stenosis or any congenital mitral stenosis. Then wide splitting of S1 indicates that the patient has some right bundle branch block or premature ventricular contraction or ventricular tachycardia. And even from closure, vibrations of aortic and pulmonary walls, and often ignored and divided into A2 and P2, that is aortic and pulmonary closure sound. So best heard as that is left middle sternal border. Left middle sternal border, mainly we will be hearing the sound, and left intercostal space, second left intercostal space. and high pitched than S1, that will be better heard with the diaphragm. And S2 splitting normal. So the normal is split due to different impedance of systemic and pulmonary vascular bursts, and it will be audible with about 20 minutes second difference, and split, that is 2 by 3 of newborns by 16 hours of age, 80% by 48 hours. And S2 splitting, that is normal in respiratory variation causes, it increases splitting on expiration and decrease pulmonary vascular resistance. And when supine, slight splitting can occur in aspiration, and in upright position, S2 usually becomes single with aspiration. And in persistent respiratory splitting is caused mainly in atrial septal defect, right bundle branch block, mild valvular pulmonary stenosis, and idiopathic dilation of the pulmonary artery, and the Wolff-Parkinson White disease. So the WPW, it's an Wolff-Parkinson White disease. So this is an congenital anomaly. Here there will be an extra-electrical pathway in the heart. There will be an extra-electrical pathway in the heart that's called as Wolff-Parkinson White. In S2 splitting abnormal, here there will be widely fixed splitting mainly in the atrial septal defect and right bundle branch block. And in again abnormal, there will be wide and mobile splitting in mild pulmonary stenosis, and even in the right ventricular outflow tract obstruction, and large ventricular septal defect or patent ductus arteriosus or idiopathic pulmonary artery dilation, and severe mitral regurgitation, or even right bundle branch block or premature ventricular contraction. And even reversed splitting, again it occurs in the left bundle branch block and Wolff-Parkinson White disease, and in case if there is any pacemaker beats, and premature ventricular contraction, aortic stenosis, patent ductus arteriosus, and left ventricular failure. And in single S2 sound, so the single S2 sound with the greater impedance of pulmonary flow, that is pulmonic 2 closer to aorta, and single and loud, it will be extreme tetralogy of Fallot, and in a transposition of great arteries on truncus arteriosus. And in single and loud pulmonic sound, it caused due to pulmonary hypertension. And in case the S2 sound is single and soft, it denotes that the patient has a typical tetralogy of Fallot. And its sound is loud, it indicates coarctation of aorta and aortic wall insufficiency. Coming to the extra hard sounds. So extra hard sound, that is commonly called as S3 and S4, and S3 gallop sound, usually physiologic, and S3 sound, already I said that while comparing with S1 and S2 sound, S3 and S4 sound is an abnormal sound, and it will be always a low pitched sound. So here it's an S3 is a gallop sound. It is a low pitched sound, occurs with a rapid filling of ventricles in each early diastole, and due to sudden intrinsic limitation of longitudinal expansion of ventricular wall, it makes the hem-took rhythm on auscultation. And the S3 sound best heard when the patient is lying on the supine position on a left lateral decubitus, and S3 sound increased by doing exercise or abnormal pressure or lifting legs. And left ventricle S3 heard at apex of the heart, and right ventricle S3 heard at left lower sternal border. And S3 seen in Kawasaki disease. So this is a disease that is mainly there will be an inflammation in the walls of medium-sized arteries throughout the body. That is a classic disease. And if prolonged, the high-pitched sound is louder. It can be a diastolic flow rumble indicating increased flow volume from atrium to ventricle. And S4 sound is again, it's an abnormal sound gallop, and it can be normal in elderly or athletes, and low pitched sound and late diastole, and due to elevated left ventricle end diastolic pressure and causing vibrations in stiff ventricular myocardium, and it also makes a tense rhythm. So S4 better heard at the apex of left lower sternal cord or in the supine or left lateral recurvatus position, and it occurs separate from S3 or summation gallop, single intense diastolic sound. And coming to S4 sound, so if you are hearing an S4 sound, it indicates that the patient has an complete heart failure and hypertrophic cardiomyopathy or severe systemic hypertension or pulmonary hypertension or Epstein abnormality or a myocarditis. And even S4 sound will be heard in tricuspid atresia, complete heart block, and total, in case of total anomalous pulmonary venous connection or coarctation of aorta or aortic stenosis or severe left ventricular disease or Kawasaki disease. And click, that is usually it's a pathologic, it's a snappy high pitched sound usually heard in early systole and due to vibrations in the artery distal to a stenotic valve. And the click can be associated with the valvular aortic stenosis or pulmonary stenosis, truncus arteriosus or pulmonary atresia or ventricular septal defect or bicuspid aortic valve or mitral valve prolapse or Epstein anomaly. Then coming to the woof sound, sometimes called a honk. It's a loud variable intensity musical sound. So this sound is a woof is heard like it's a musical sound, better heard at the apex in the latest systole, and it associated with mitral valve prolapse or mitral regurgitation, or even seen in ventricular septal defect closing, or the patient also having an aneurysm or rarely tricuspid regurgitation. And even some woofs evolve to become systolic murmur. Coming to the friction rub. So friction rub is it's a creaking sound heard with the pericardial inflammation. It has three components, then have fewer than three components, and this friction rub will be changes with the position and louder with inspiration. And murmur, it's a sound made by turbulence in the heart or bloodstream, and it is mainly caused in a benign, that is innocent flow, functional or pathologic. And murmur or leading cause of referred or further evaluation, because sometimes the murmur may be caused due to a congenital heart disease. So if you are hearing a murmur for a long time, better you have to refer the patient for further echo or Doppler. And don't let the murmur distract you from the rest of the exam. Then coming to the laboratory test. Laboratory test commonly we will do CPK and CKMB. CPK is normally it's less than 200 and CKMB is less than 25. And lactate dehydrogenase or trophi or a low density lipoprotein LDL and high density lipoprotein. This is all the things will be done while doing the fasting lipid profile. Cholesterol level, so everything is coming under the fasting lipid profile, LDL and HDL, that is LDL it will be normal value is less than 130 milligram per deciliter, HDL it is 35 to 85 milligram per deciliter, and triglycerides it's normal 40 to 150 milligram per deciliter. And even we will do the coagulation study, PT, PTT, INR. That is in case if the patient is receiving any anticoagulant therapy, better we have to monitor the coagulation factor, that is prothrombin time. then along with that we should take chest x-ray and fluoroscopy or electrocardiography. Thank you.